Listen here, child. Come close to this fire, let the shadows dance across your face while I tell you something that ain't in no white man's book, ain't on no museum wall. This here story lives in the blood, in the marrow of our bones, passed down from mouth to ear since them dark days when the Atlantic Ocean swallowed our screams and spit out chains. I's talking about Eliza. Eliza of the Strangling, they called her. Born in hell's own belly, forged in fire hotter than any furnace man ever built. The auction block knew her name. The whipping post drank her blood. And the rope. Lord have mercy. That rope kissed her neck 450 times. 450 times, you hear me? But she didn't break. No, sir, she bent like the willow, but her roots went deep as the ancestors' memory. This ain't no tale for the faint-hearted. This be the truth of cotton and blood, of mothers wailing for babies torn from they arms, of men worked to shadows under that murderous sun. This be about Alabama soil that drank more tears than rain, about a woman who turned suffering into a sword sharper than any overseer's blade. So settle yourself. Don't turn away from what needs remembering. 'Cause Eliza's story, it still breathes, it still burns. And if you listen real close, you can hear her whisper riding on the wind that blows through them old cotton fields. The Middle Passage got no mercy in its heart, child. That's where Eliza first drew breath, down in the suffocating darkness of a slave ship's hold, where the stench of death mixed with salt water and despair thick enough to choke on. Her mama, a proud Ashanti woman stolen from the Gold Coast, labored in chains while the ocean rocked that floating coffin, each wave a mockery of cradle songs. They say the night Eliza was born, the ancestors wept so hard the storm nearly split that devil's vessel clean in two. Thunder rolled like African drums across the black water, lightning showing glimpses of horror no human eye should witness. Bodies packed tight as tobacco leaves, children crying for mothers already gone to the deep, old ones praying to gods whose names the white man tried to drown. Eliza's mama, her name was Amma, though Massa would later call her just that big wench. She bit clean through a piece of wood to keep from screaming when the birth pains came. The iron collar round her neck cut into flesh already raw, her wrists bleeding from the shackles that held her to the ship's ribs like she was cargo, not creation. But Amma was strong-backed woman, fierce as the lions her people once hunted, and she brought that baby girl into the world with nothing but her own two hands and the whispered prayers of the chained souls around her. "Breathe, little one," Amma whispered in Twi, her mother tongue. "Breathe this bitter air and live. You must live." The baby's first cry cut through the groans and rattling chains, a sound so pure it made even the hardest souls weep. One old wise one, a root doctor from Dahomey who'd been stealing herbs from the ship's stores, reached out with gnarled fingers to touch the child's forehead. His voice came out like gravel and prophecy mixed together. "This one," he said, eyes milky but seeing things beyond this world. "This one got iron in her bones. The spirits marked her. She gonna suffer something terrible, Lord of Glory, but she gonna survive when others fall. Mark my words, this child gonna make the earth tremble before she done." Amma held her daughter close, feeling that tiny heart beating against her own, and in that moment of pure love she tried to forget the horror all around. The stink of bodies that would never see land again, the constant creaking of wood and chains, the white sailors' laughter drifting down from above like demons mocking the damned. She sang soft, so soft only Eliza could hear, an old song from her village about the moon watching over sleeping children. But even that small mercy got stolen quick. A driver came down with his lamp, swinging it to count the living from the dead. When he saw the newborn, his mouth twisted into something cruel. "Another mouth to feed," he muttered. "Cap'n won't be pleased about wasting rations on a baby born mid-voyage." He grabbed Amma's chin rough, turning her face to the light. "You better pray this one lives to see the block or you'll catch the cat-o'-nine yourself." Days crawled by like wounded things. Amma nursed Eliza in the dark, her own body starving, but somehow producing milk through sheer will and ancestral grace. Other women, suffering their own private hells, would reach through the chains to touch the baby's soft skin. remembering their own children left behind or sold away, drawing strength from that small life. "What you name her?" asked a young sister from the Igbo lands, her voice barely a whisper. Amma thought long on this. The white man would give the child a name meant to strip away her soul, make her forget she came from greatness. But for now, in this hell between worlds, she could speak truth. "Eliza," Amma said, mixing the sound the white man used with the spirit of her mother's name. Eliza, the one who brings light in darkness. But her true name, the one the ancestors know that I keep buried in my heart. They can't take everything, sister. They can't take everything. The ship sailed on, cutting through water stained with the bones of those who chose the deep over the chain. At night, when the crew slept off their rum, the enslaved would sing, low and mournful, coded songs that spoke of home and freedom, of rivers that led back to the motherland, of a day when justice would come riding on wings of fire. Eliza grew in that darkness, fed on sorrow and dreams, her mama's heartbeat the only constant in a world gone mad. Finally, after weeks that felt like lifetimes, Charleston Harbor appeared on the horizon. Lord have mercy, what a sight that must have been. Land after endless water, but not the home they'd been stolen from. This was a different kind of hell, dressed up pretty with white buildings and church steeples, hiding its true nature behind magnolia trees and sweet talking. They dragged the survivors up from the hold, blinking in sunlight that hurt eyes grown used to darkness. Eliza, just a few weeks old, was tied to her mama's chest with a strip of cloth torn from someone's burial shroud. The salt air mixed with the stink of the slave market, and even the gulls seemed to cry out in mourning. The auction block waited like an altar to the devil himself. Men in fine clothes walked among the chained people, poking and prodding like we was livestock, checking teeth and muscles, discussing prices while families clung to each other, knowing the tearing apart was coming. Amma stood tall despite her weakness, despite knowing what awaited. She looked down at baby Eliza, memorizing every feature. Them eyes already showing something fierce, skin the color of rich earth after rain. Tiny fists clenched like she was ready to fight the whole wicked world. The auctioneer's voice rang out, cheerful as a preacher at Sunday service, selling souls like they was sacks of rice. "Fine Ashanti woman, strong-backed, good breeder. And look here, gentlemen, she comes with a healthy infant girl. Future field hand or house servant, your choice." Massa Harrington, a plantation owner from Alabama with cold eyes and a smile that never reached him, stepped forward. He examined Amma like she was a horse, then glanced at Eliza with calculation. "I'll take the woman," he said. "But the infant..." He paused, and in that pause Amma's heart stopped. "I suppose she might live. We'll see." Money changed hands. Papers was signed. And just like that, Eliza and Amma belonged to Harrington Plantation, bound for the cotton fields of Alabama, where the sun beat down merciless and the soil was hungry for blood and sweat. But before they loaded the wagon, a blacksmith came with his terrible tools. Amma was forced to her knees, held down by rough hands while Eliza screamed in her arms. The iron came out of the fire, glowing red as hell itself, branded with Harrington's mark, a cursive H that would claim ownership of flesh and bone. "Hold still, wench," the blacksmith barked. The searing iron touched Amma's shoulder, and her scream tore through the marketplace. The smell of burning skin mixed with the ocean breeze. But even through her agony, she held Eliza tight, whispering through clenched teeth, "You gonna survive, daughter. You gonna survive this and everything else they throw at you. I promise you. I promise." That brand, that mark of ownership burned into flesh. That was Eliza's true baptism into the hell of American slavery. Not in church water, but in pain and iron. And as the wagon pulled away from Charleston, heading inland toward Alabama's killing fields, baby Eliza's eyes was already open, already watching, already learning that this world had teeth. The Alabama sun don't play, child. It ain't like no gentle morning light. It's a hammer beaten down on your skull from can't see morning till can't see night, turning the cotton fields into a furnace where souls got cooked slow. By the time Eliza turned 10 years old, she knew every kind of pain that sun could bring, every shade of suffering the plantation could devise. Harrington plantation stretched out like a kingdom of cruelty. Thousands of acres planted in cotton white as clouds, but picked by hands black and bleedin'. The big house sat up on a rise, all columns and paint, white as a lie, surrounded by magnolia trees that smelled sweet to cover up the stench of bondage. But down in the quarters, Lord have mercy. That's where the truth lived. Wooden shacks leanin' like they was tired of standin'. Dirt floors that turned to mud when it rained. Families packed in tight, rats and roaches for company. The smell of too many bodies with nowhere to wash proper. Eliza grew up fast, too fast, the way enslaved children do when childhood ain't allowed. Her mama Amma worked the fields, strong-backed and silent now. That fire from the ship dimmed but not dead. She taught Eliza what she could, how to move efficient through the cotton rows, how to hide pain behind a blank face, how to pray to the ancestors in secret, mixing the old gods with the new Jesus they preached about in that overseer-watched praise house. "Keep your eyes down, but your spirit up," Amma would whisper when they lay on their straw pallets at night. "They can beat the body, daughter, but the soul belonged to us and the ancestors. Don't never forget." But when Eliza was 8 years old, something broke that couldn't be fixed. Massa Harrington had debts, see, and when white men got money troubles, black families pay the price. Eliza's daddy, a gentleman named Kofi who carved little dolls from wood scraps for his daughter, who sang work songs in a voice that made even the hardest heart soften. He got sold off to a plantation down in the deep Mississippi Delta. The day they took him, Eliza stood in the quarters watching the wagon pull away. Her small hands clenched so tight the nails drew blood from her palms. Her daddy looked back once, his face a mask of grief and rage and helplessness, and their eyes met. No words, but she understood. Survive. Remember, don't let him break you. "Daddy!" She started to scream, but Amma's hand clamped over her mouth. "Hush, child," her mama whispered fierce. "Don't make it worse. Don't give him the satisfaction." That night, Eliza learned what hate tastes like. It's bitter, metallic, like blood in the mouth. And she swallowed it down, let it settle in her belly where it would grow and fester and wait. 2 years passed, and Eliza was put to work full-time in the fields. 10 years old, hands still small but already calloused, back already aching from the cotton sack dragging behind her. The thorns and bowls cut her fingers daily, left 'em bleeding into the white fiber, mixing pain with profit. The overseer, a mean dog of a man called Captain Zeke, he ruled them fields like a tyrant king, riding his horse up and down the rows, bullwhip coiled and ready. Zeke was poor white trash who'd clawed his way up to overseer by being crueler than most, taking out all his own suffering on people who couldn't fight back. He had a face like sun-dried leather, eyes pale and cold as a snake's, and a tongue that never stopped wagging with insults and threats. "Move faster, you lazy dogs," he'd shout, cracking that whip just to hear it sing. "Massa Harrington don't pay me to watch you loaf about. That cotton ain't gonna pick itself." Eliza tried to keep her head down, tried to follow her mama's advice and stay invisible. But she had fire in her bones, spirit that wouldn't quite submit, and Zeke noticed. Oh yes, he noticed the way her eyes flashed sometimes when he passed, the way her jaw clenched when he cursed them, the fierce set of her young shoulders. One burning afternoon in late summer, when the heat made everything shimmer like a fever dream, Eliza was working her row beside a little boy named Samuel. Couldn't have been more than 7, scrawny thing with ribs showing through his skin. Samuel was slow, sick with something, dropping more cotton than he picked. Eliza tried to help him, slipping bowls from her sack to his when no one was looking, but it wasn't enough. Zeke saw. He always saw. "Boy," Zeke's voice cut through the field like a blade. "You think I'm blind? You think I don't see you dragging behind?" Samuel froze, little body trembling. "Please, Captain, I'm trying my best." "Your best ain't worth spit." Zeke dismounted, bullwhip uncoiling like a serpent. "Time you learned what happens to lazy property." Before anyone could move, before the overseer stationed at the field's edge could even blink, Eliza stepped between Zeke and the boy. 10 years old, barely tall as Zeke's chest, but standing firm with her chin up and eyes blazing. "He's sick, Captain," she said. voice steady despite her racing heart. "He need water and rest. Beating him won't make him pick faster." The field went silent. Even the cicadas seemed to stop their buzzing. Every soul there knew what Eliza had just done. Talked back to an overseer, questioned his authority, showed defiance. That was a killing offense in some places, a savage beating in all of them. Zeke's face went red, then purple. His mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile if it had any humanity in it. "Well, well, well," he said soft, which was more terrifying than shouting. "Looks like we got ourselves a uppity little wench here. Think you can tell me my business, girl? Think you know better than me?" "I think," Eliza started, but Zeke's backhand caught her across the face so hard she sprawled into the dirt, tasting blood. "You don't think," he roared. "Property don't think. You pick, you work, you obey, or you suffer. That's all you need to know." He grabbed Eliza by her hair, dragging her to her feet. The other enslaved people watched, frozen between terror for the girl and fear for themselves if they intervened. Amma started forward, but the driver held her back, shaking his head. Interfering would just mean 2 beatings instead of 1. Zeke dragged Eliza toward the edge of the field where an old oak tree stood, its branches spreading wide like arms ready to embrace or condemn. From one branch hung a rope, already tied in a noose. Always there, always waiting. A constant reminder of who held life and death in their hands. "You want to be brave?" Zeke hissed in her ear. "Let's see how brave you are when you can't breathe." He slipped the noose over Eliza's head, and her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. But she didn't beg, didn't cry. She looked at Zeke with such hate, such pure, concentrated loathing, that something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe even a moment of uncertainty. "This here's what we call a lesson," Zeke announced to the watching field. "Partial enforcement, so's not to waste masses' property. Just enough to teach respect." He pulled the rope. Eliza's feet lifted off the ground, and suddenly she couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, could only feel the rope crushing her windpipe as she dangled in the air. Her vision went spotty, dark at the edges, lungs screaming for air that wouldn't come. She heard the ancestors whispering, felt her daddy's presence, saw her mama's face distorted through tears and oxygen starvation. Just when the darkness was about to swallow her whole, Zeke lowered her down, let her feet touch dirt again, gasping and choking and alive, but only for a moment. Then he hoisted her up again, laughing as she kicked and struggled, her small hands clawing at the rope that was killing her slow. "Count it, people," Zeke called out. "Count so's you remember. 1. Down she came, coughing blood, throat on fire, barely able to drag in half a breath before. 2. Up again, the world spinning, her spirit reaching for the ancestors' hands but not quite ready to leave this flesh. Not yet. Not yet. 3. This was the first of 450 times Eliza would dance with death on that rope. The first time she'd taste her own mortality and spit it back. And as Zeke finally let her collapse in the dirt, her voice hoarse and damaged but not broken, she made a vow deep in her soul where no master or overseer could reach. "They can strangle my body, but they won't strangle my spirit. And one day, I'm gonna strangle back." Zeke stood over her, breathing hard from the exertion, that twisted smile still on his face. "From now on, girl, you my special project. Every time you show that fire, I'm gonna drown it. Every time you forget your place, I'm gonna remind you. And if you smart, you'll learn to keep that pretty mouth shut." He walked away, leaving Eliza in the dirt, the rope burned raw and bleeding around her neck like a second brand. The field hands returned to work, silence heavy as grief. Amma rushed over when the overseers weren't looking, cradling her daughter's head. "I'm sorry," Eliza rasped, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Mama." "Hush now," Amma said, tears streaming down her face. "Hush. You was brave, daughter. Foolish and brave. But this world don't reward brave. It punishes it." That night in the quarters, an old conjure woman came to treat Eliza's neck. She applied poultices made from roots and leaves, muttered prayers in languages older than slavery, drew symbols on the floor with cornmeal and gopher dust. "This child marked," the conjure woman said, her voice like wind through dead leaves. "The spirits got plans for her. Heavy burdens make strong shoulders, and her shoulders gonna carry the weight of our people's pain and pride." As Eliza drifted into painful sleep, her hand found an old hoe handle near her pallet. A tool, a weapon, a symbol. And in her fever dreams, she saw herself not as a child, but as a woman grown, standing over Zeke's broken body, the rope that strangled her now wrapped around his throat, his tongue silenced forever. It was just a dream, but dreams can grow into promises. And promises, child, they can grow into vengeance. The rope burn around Eliza's neck healed crooked, leaving a scar that would never fade, the first of many marks she'd carry, a map of suffering written on flesh. But what Zeke didn't know, what none of them knew, was that every strangling made her stronger, more determined, more dangerous. The fire he tried to drown, it was just starting to burn. Years passed like water through cupped hands, slipping away but leaving marks behind. Eliza grew from that defiant child into a young woman of 16, her body shaped by hard labor, her spirit tempered like steel in fire. The scar around her neck from that first strangling never faded. It became her necklace, her testimony, a reminder carved in flesh. Harrington Plantation sprawled across Alabama earth like a beast that fed on suffering. The big house stood at its heart, white columns gleaming under the pitiless sun, magnolia trees dropping their sweet-smelling blossoms to cover up the stench of bondage. Inside them walls, Massa Harrington and his kin lived like kings. Crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, fine china brought all the way from England. They sipped their mint juleps on the veranda, fanned by house servants, never touching nothing their own selves. But down in the quarters, Lord have mercy, that's where the real world lived. Rows of wooden shacks, each one housing 3, 4, sometimes 5 families packed tight as sardines in a tin. Dirt floors turned to mud when rain came through the leaky roofs. No glass in the windows, just wooden shutters that didn't keep out the mosquitoes or the night chill. Folks slept on straw pallets crawling with bugs, covered with rags that used to be blankets. The smell, sweat, sickness, despair all mixed together. That was the perfume of slavery, child. That was our daily bread. Eliza worked the field 6 days a week, can't see morning till can't see night, her hands perpetually bleeding from the cotton thorns, her back bent under the weight of the sack. But she'd grown tall and strong, her beauty a dangerous thing in a place where masters and overseers thought they owned more than just labor. Her skin was smooth as polished mahogany, eyes deep and fierce, body curved despite the starvation rations. She drew eyes, wrong kind of eyes. Captain Zeke watched her always now, his gaze crawling over her like something unclean. He'd find reasons to call her out from the field, make her stand close while he inspected her work. His breath hot and rank with tobacco and meanness. The other enslaved women recognized that look, warned Eliza in whispers to be careful, stay in groups, never be alone with him. That man got the devil in him, old Auntie Ruth said one evening in the quarters, her voice low and knowing. I seen his kind before. He don't just want to break your body, he want to own your soul. You watch yourself, child. Keep that conjure bag I gave you close and don't never let him catch you by yourself. The conjure bag hung between Eliza's breasts, a small pouch of red flannel filled with roots, graveyard dirt, and whispered prayers. Auntie Ruth was a root doctor, one of them wise ones who carried African knowledge in her bones, who could read signs and work miracles with herbs and ritual. She'd become like a second mother to Eliza after Amma caught fever and passed to the ancestors 3 winters back. Sundays brought a different kind of bondage. Massa Harrington, wanting to appear righteous before God and neighbors, made all his enslaved people attend service in the praise house, a small building near the big house where a white preacher twisted scripture to justify chains. Servants, obey your masters, the preacher would shout, his face red and sweaty. It's God's will. You was cursed through Ham, marked for servitude. Work hard, don't steal, don't lie, and maybe you'll get to heaven when you die. Eliza sat through them sermons, her face blank but her mind raging. This wasn't the Jesus her mama taught her about, the one who loved the downtrodden and promised freedom. This was white man's religion, designed to keep us quiet, keep us obedient, keep us thinking our suffering was divine punishment instead of human evil. But at night, oh at night, that's when the real church happened. Deep in the woods, past where the paddy rollers usually rode, there was a clearing the enslaved folks called the Hush Harbor. Trees formed a natural cathedral, and there, under the cover of darkness and Spanish moss, people worshipped free. Eliza would slip away when the moon was dark, following the secret paths through the underbrush, listening for the signal, a certain kind of owl hoot that meant the coast was clear. In the Hush Harbor, folks sang the real spirituals, the ones with coded meanings that spoke of escape and resistance. Wade in the water, children. They'd sing soft but intense, voices rising and falling like waves. God's gonna trouble the water. Old Brother Moses, a grizzled man who'd been a chief back in Africa, would lead the ring shout, that ancient dance where folks moved in a circle, feet shuffling in rhythm, hands clapping, bodies swaying as the spirit moved through them. It was Africa and America mixed together, the old gods dancing with the new one, creating something powerful and dangerous and free. The North Star, Brother Moses would preach, his voice deep as thunder. She ain't just a light in the sky. She the promise. She the way home. Follow her children, and you find Canaan land. Whispers of the Underground Railroad reached even Alabama. Stories of a woman called Moses, Harriet Tubman, who led people north to freedom, who never lost a passenger, who had visions from God telling her which paths to take. Eliza drank in these stories like water in the desert, imagining herself on that journey, crossing rivers and mountains, dodging paddy rollers and bloodhounds, finally breathing free air. "You thinking about running?" a young man named Isaiah whispered to her one night after the Hush Harbor meeting. He was field hand like her, strong and clever, with dreams of freedom burning in his eyes. Eliza looked at him, weighing trust against caution. "Thinking ain't doing," she finally said. "Not yet, but one day," Isaiah echoed, and in that moment something passed between them. Understanding, connection, maybe the beginning of love in a place where love was dangerous as rebellion. But Zeke had noticed Eliza's nighttime disappearances. He didn't know where she went, but he knew she was up to something, and that made his obsession worse. He started appearing at the quarters after dark, making excuses to search the cabins, his eyes always finding Eliza, lingering too long. "You hiding something, girl?" he'd ask, that serpent smile on his face. "You know what happens to uppity wenches who think they can keep secrets?" Eliza would keep her eyes down, voice respectful but cold. "No, sir, Captain. Just sleeping when I should be." "Sleeping," he repeated, not believing. "Well, you keep sleeping right, and remember, I'm watching. Always watching." The tension built like storm clouds on the horizon. Eliza could feel it in her bones, in the way Zeke's harassment was escalating, in the whispered warnings from the other women, in the way Isaiah looked at her with concern and helpless anger. Something was coming, something dark and terrible, and all she could do was prepare her spirit and trust in the ancestors to guide her through. That night, alone in the cabin she shared with 3 other families, Eliza held her conjure bag tight and whispered a prayer her mama taught her, mixing Ashanti words with English. "Ancestors, give me strength, give me wisdom, and when the time comes, give me the courage to strike back." Outside, an owl hooted, but this time it wasn't a signal. It was a warning. The spirits were restless, and change was blowing in on the Alabama wind. The warning came true 3 days later, on a morning when the air hung heavy with the promise of violence. Eliza was working her row, cotton sack dragging behind her, when she heard a child's scream cut through the thick August heat. Her head snapped up, and she saw what made her blood run cold. Little Thomas, a boy no more than 8 years old, had stumbled and dropped his basket, spilling cotton across the red Alabama clay. Captain Zeke was already off his horse, bullwhip uncoiling like a living thing hungry for blood. The boy scrambled backward, eyes wide with terror, but there was nowhere to run in them open fields, just endless rows of cotton, and the hard blue sky pressing down like a lid on a coffin. "Clumsy little bastard," Zeke roared, his face purple with rage that seemed too big for such a small offense. But that was the nature of power without check. It didn't need reason, only opportunity. "I'll teach you to waste massa's cotton." The whip sang through the air and bit into Thomas's back. The child's scream tore through every soul in that field, a sound so full of pain and terror it made the ancestors weep. Blood bloomed across his thin shirt, spreading like crimson flowers. Eliza's body moved before her mind could catch up. She dropped her sack and ran toward them, her voice ringing out strong despite the danger. "Captain Zeke, please, sir. He just a child. He didn't mean no harm." The field went silent. Birds stopped singing. Even the cicadas seemed to hold their breath. Every enslaved person there knew what Eliza had done. Interrupted an overseer's punishment, showed defiance again, marked herself for retribution. Zeke turned slowly, that terrible smile spreading across his scarred face. His pale eyes glittered with something worse than anger, satisfaction. He'd been waiting for this, wanting this, needing an excuse to put Eliza in her place permanent-like. "Well, well," he drawled, coiling the bloody whip. "If it ain't my favorite uppity wench, you just can't help yourself, can you? Always got to stick your nose where it don't belong." "The boy's sick, Captain," Eliza said, forcing her voice to stay calm, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "He got the fever. You can see he's shaking. Beating him won't make him work better." "Shut your mouth." Zeke's backhand caught her across the face, splitting her lip. The taste of blood, metallic and bitter, filled her mouth. "You think I care about your opinion? You think your thoughts matter one damn bit?" He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise, and dragged her toward the oak tree. That tree. It had seen so much suffering it seemed to lean away from itself. Branches twisted like hands trying to ward off evil. The rope still hung there, always waiting. A noose already tied and ready for its next victim. "You want to save the boy?" Zeke hissed in her ear. "Fine, you take his punishment. Let's see how brave you are when you can't breathe." Eliza's legs trembled, but she walked steady, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. She could feel the eyes of every field hand on her. Some filled with pity, others with helpless anger, all of them knowing they were powerless to stop what was coming. The driver, a man named Big Jim who hated his position but needed the extra rations for his sick wife, stepped forward hesitant-like. "Captain, maybe we should just—" "You questioning me too?" Zeke whirled on him, hand going to the pistol at his belt. "Want to join her? I can string up two just as easy as one." Big Jim stepped back, eyes downcast, and Eliza didn't blame him. Survival meant knowing when to fight and when to bend. She'd just chosen fighting, and now came the price. Zeke slipped the noose over Eliza's head, and the rough hemp scraped against the old scar from 6 years ago. Her breathing quickened despite her determination to stay calm. She could see her mama's face in her mind, hear her voice. "They can beat the body, daughter, but the soul belonged to us." "This here's lesson number 2, Zeke announced to the watching field, his voice carrying like a preacher's. "For them, what forgot lesson number 1, you don't talk back. You don't interfere. You do your work and keep your mouth shut, or you suffer the consequences." He pulled the rope. Eliza's feet left the ground, and suddenly the world narrowed to a single, desperate need: air. The noose crushed her windpipe, cutting off breath, cutting off sound, cutting off life itself. Her hands clawed at the rope instinctively, legs kicking in empty air, searching for ground that wasn't there. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. Her lungs screamed silently, burning like someone had poured hot coals down her throat. She could hear her heartbeat thundering in her ears, could feel her eyes bulging, tears streaming down her face, not from crying, but from the body's desperate response to dying. Just when the darkness was about to take her completely, Zeke lowered her down. Her feet touched dirt and she gasped, dragging in air that felt like swallowing glass. Her throat was raw, damaged, each breath agony and blessing mixed together. "1!" Zeke called out cheerfully like he was counting dance steps at a party. Eliza's knees buckled, but she forced herself to stay standing. Through the haze of pain and oxygen deprivation, She could see little Thomas crying, could see the other field hands with their heads bowed, could see Big Jim's hands clenched into fists at his sides, wanting to intervene but knowing it would only make things worse. Before she could fully recover, Zeke hoisted her up again. The noose bit deeper this time, finding the same bruised flesh, and the pain was sharper, more immediate. Her vision went spotty, stars bursting behind her eyes like fireworks celebrating her death. She could hear the ancestors calling, could feel their hands reaching for her across the veil between worlds. "Not yet," she told them silently. "Not yet. I got work to do here first." 2. Zeke's voice came from far away, distorted like she was underwater. Down she came, coughing blood this time, red droplets spattering on the Alabama clay. Her voice was gone, destroyed, reduced to a ragged whisper that sounded like wind through dead leaves. 3. Up again. This time she didn't fight it, didn't struggle. She let her body go limp, conserving what little strength remained. In that moment of surrender, something strange happened. The pain receded, and she found herself in a place between life and death where her mama stood waiting, young and strong like she was before slavery broke her body. "Mama?" Eliza's voice worked in this spirit place, clear and whole. "Not your time yet, daughter," Amma said, her hand reaching out but not quite touching. "You got a destiny to fulfill. This suffering, it's tempering your soul, making you strong enough to do what needs doing. Every strangling that don't kill you makes you more dangerous to them. Remember that." 4. The vision shattered. Eliza crashed back into her body as Zeke lowered her again, and the pain was worse than before because now she knew. This wouldn't end today. This was just the beginning of a torture that would stretch across years, across hundreds of stranglings, each one a little death that somehow she'd survive. 5. Her throat was destroyed now, voice reduced to nothing. Blood ran down her chin, her neck, soaking into the collar of her dress. But through it all, through the pain and the terror and the humiliation, something hardened inside her. A core of pure rage, cold and focused, that would sustain her through everything to come. After the 10th strangling, Zeke finally stopped. He let Eliza collapse in the dirt, where she lay gasping like a fish on dry land, each breath a battle won through sheer will. "Let that be a lesson," Zeke said, breathing hard from the exertion, that sick satisfaction in his voice. "To all of you, this is what defiance gets you. This is what happens when you forget your place." He mounted his horse and rode off, leaving Eliza bleeding in the dirt. The field hands stood frozen for a moment. Then someone, Auntie Ruth, broke rank and rushed to her side, cradling her head gently. "Don't try to talk, child," Auntie Ruth whispered, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Save your strength. We gonna take care of you." But Eliza's eyes were open, staring up at the sky with an intensity that made Auntie Ruth shiver, because in those eyes burned something Zeke had tried to strangle out, but had instead fed and strengthened: the promise of vengeance. The certainty that one day, somehow, she would make him pay for every moment of this suffering. That night, in the quarters, Auntie Ruth worked her conjure, applying poultices of healing herbs, speaking prayers in Yoruba and Igbo, drawing protective symbols on the floor with sacred cornmeal. Isaiah sat beside Eliza, holding her hand, his young face twisted with helpless rage. "I'm gonna kill him," Isaiah whispered. "I swear before God and the ancestors." Eliza squeezed his hand, her damaged voice barely audible. "No, not yet. Time will come, but not yet." Because she understood now what her mama's spirit had shown her. This suffering had a purpose. It was forging her into a weapon, sharp and deadly, that one day would cut through the chains that bound them all. She just had to survive long enough to strike. 2 years crept by like wounded things, each day bleeding into the next under that merciless Alabama sun. Eliza was 18 now, her voice permanently damaged from the stranglings that had become routine. Zeke found new reasons weekly to string her up, sometimes for real offenses, more often for imagined ones. Her throat bore scars upon scars, a permanent collar of suffering that marked her as his special victim. But life, stubborn and persistent, found ways to bloom even in Hell's Garden. Isaiah and Eliza had grown closer despite the danger, stealing moments together in the fields, in the hush harbor, in the precious hours between exhaustion and sleep. Their love was a quiet rebellion, a refusal to let slavery strip away every human connection, every tender feeling. When Eliza discovered she was carrying a child, terror and joy warred in her chest. She'd seen too many babies torn from mothers' arms, sold away like livestock before they could even walk. The auction block haunted her dreams, that wooden platform where families were shattered, where children screamed for mamas who couldn't save them, where white men bid on human souls like they was buying furniture. "What we gonna do?" Isaiah whispered one night in the quarters, his hand gentle on her still flat belly. "I can't. Lord God, I can't watch them sell our baby." "We pray," Eliza rasped, her damaged voice making every word an effort. "We trust the ancestors, and we prepare for whatever comes." The pregnancy showed soon enough. Massa Harrington, always calculating profit and loss, seemed pleased. Another slave born meant future labor, future wealth. But Zeke looked at Eliza's swelling belly with something darker in his eyes, a jealousy twisted with possessiveness, like he resented that someone else had touched what he considered his to torment. The strangling stopped during the pregnancy, but only because damaged goods brought less at auction. Zeke found other ways to make Eliza suffer. Longer hours in the fields despite her condition, smaller rations, verbal abuse that cut deeper than any whip. Still, she endured, her hands cradling her belly protectively, whispering promises to the life growing inside. "You gonna be strong," she'd murmur in the darkness. "You gonna know love even in this terrible place. And maybe you gonna live to see freedom." Auntie Ruth, skilled in midwifery along with her conjure work, prepared herbs and charms for the birth. She made a mojo bag filled with protective roots, Angelica for strength, High John the Conqueror for power, graveyard dirt from an ancestor's grave for connection to the other side. "This child coming into hard times," Auntie Ruth said, her old eyes seeing things beyond the physical. "But they got destiny written on them. The spirits whisper about this one. You carry hope, daughter, even if it don't feel like it." When Eliza's time came, it was in the dead of night, laboring on a straw pallet in the quarters with only candlelight and the whispered prayers of the women gathered round. The pain was immense, tearing through her body like fire, but she bit down on a stick of wood and pushed through it, determined to bring her child into the world strong. "Push, child," Auntie Ruth commanded. "Push like you pushing away all the suffering. Push like you birthing freedom itself." And then, a cry. Small, indignant, furiously alive. A boy, perfect and beautiful despite being born into bondage. Eliza wept as they laid him on her chest, his tiny fists waving, his eyes squeezed shut against the harsh world he'd entered. Isaiah, who'd been waiting outside trembling with fear and hope, was allowed in to see his son. "Jeremiah," Eliza whispered, naming him after a prophet who spoke truth to power. His name Jeremiah. And he gonna survive, just like his mama. The weeks that followed were the sweetest Eliza had ever known, even in the midst of slavery's bitterness. She'd wrap Jeremiah in a cloth and carry him to the fields, nursing him under the shade of her cotton sack when the overseers weren't watching too close. At night, she'd sing to him, old spirituals mixed with Ashanti lullabies her own mama had sung, creating a bridge between Africa and America in melody. "Hush, little baby, don't you cry," she'd rasp in her damaged voice. "Mama gonna sing you a lullaby, and if the master come to take you away, the ancestors gonna hide you till Freedom Day." Jeremiah grew fat and happy despite the poverty around him, his laughter a sound so pure it made even the hardest souls in the quarters smile. The community raised him together. Everyone was auntie or uncle. Everyone took turns watching, protecting, loving this child who represented hope in a hopeless place. But good things in slavery never lasted long. When Jeremiah was 5 years old, walking and talking and full of questions about why the sky was blue, and whether the North Star really led to freedom, Massa Harrington's debts came calling again. Eliza was working the fields when she saw the slave trader's wagon pull up to the big house. Her blood turned to ice. She'd seen them wagons before, knew what they meant: separation, sale, families torn apart for profit. Her hands stilled on the cotton bolls, her whole body tensing with animal awareness of danger. Big Jim, the driver, approached her with his face twisted in grief. "Eliza, I'm sorry. So sorry. Massa Dunn sold some folks to cover his gambling debts. He sold Jeremiah." The world stopped spinning. Time froze. Eliza's heart shattered so completely she wondered how her chest could still contain the pieces. "No," she whispered. "No, not my baby. Not Jeremiah." But even as she spoke, she was running, dropping her cotton sack, sprinting toward the big house, her damaged voice screaming his name. "Jeremiah! Jeremiah!" She could see him in the yard, held by the slave trader, his little face confused and frightened. When he saw his mama running toward him, he started crying, reaching for her with his small hands. "Mama, Mama, I scared." Eliza ran faster than she'd ever run. But Zeke was faster. He caught her, wrestled her to the ground, pinned her arms behind her back while she fought like a wild thing, all dignity forgotten in a mother's desperate need to reach her child. "Let me go. That's my son, my baby, please." Her voice broke completely, reduced to gasping sobs. "Should have thought about that before you got uppity." Zeke hissed in her ear. "This is what happens when you don't learn. Maybe losing your boy will teach you what the rope couldn't." The trader loaded Jeremiah into the wagon with a dozen other enslaved people. Men, women, children, all crying, all being torn from everything they knew. Jeremiah screamed for his mama, his voice cutting through the air like a blade through Eliza's heart. "Mama, don't let them take me! Mama!" Eliza fought against Zeke's hold with superhuman strength, but he was bigger, stronger, and when she nearly broke free, he struck her across the head with his pistol butt. Stars exploded in her vision. Blood ran down her face, but still she screamed her son's name. The wagon pulled away, wheels crunching on gravel, carrying her heart away with it. Jeremiah's cries grew fainter, then faded completely, swallowed by distance and the cruel indifference of a world built on suffering. Isaiah found her later, still on the ground where Zeke had left her, her voice completely gone from screaming, her body shaking with sobs that had no sound. He gathered her in his arms, and they wept together, two parents who'd lost their child to the machinery of slavery, powerless against a system designed to break them. "I'm gonna kill him," Isaiah whispered, his voice thick with rage and tears. "I'm gonna kill Zeke, kill Harrington, kill every white man who did this." But Eliza grabbed his face, forced him to look at her. Through her tears, through her destroyed voice, she managed a single word: "Wait." Because she understood now with terrible clarity. Revenge taken in hot anger would be brief, would get them both killed, would accomplish nothing. But revenge planned in cold patience, nurtured through years of suffering, tempered in the fires of loss, that kind of revenge could shake the world. That night, Auntie Ruth held Eliza while she wept silently, her body racked with grief that had no outlet. The old conjure woman rocked her like a child, singing prayers and curses mixed together. "The ancestors see this," Auntie Ruth whispered. "They mark it in the book of debts owed, and one day, child, one day that book gonna come due. You hold on, you survive, and when the time come, you strike with all the fury of a mother's love turned to righteous rage." Eliza held her empty arms, remembering the weight of Jeremiah against her chest, his sweet baby smell, his laughter that could make the sun seem brighter. And in the hollow where her heart used to be, something new grew, a hatred so pure and focused it would sustain her through everything to come. This was strangling number 47 in her count of torments, but it was the worst one yet, because it strangled not her throat, but her soul. After Jeremiah was torn away, something shifted in the terrible rhythm of Eliza's bondage. Zeke, seeing her broken by loss, decided it was time to finish what he'd started, to strangle every last spark of defiance from her soul. The rope became her constant companion, that oak tree her altar of suffering. and the counting a litany of torment that echoed through the quarters like a death song. 25, 30, 40. The numbers climbed steady as cotton prices, each strangling a little death Eliza somehow survived. Zeke developed a sick routine, finding new reasons daily to string her up. A cotton sack half a pound light, a glance held too long, a spiritual hummed too loud in the fields. The other enslaved folks learned to recognize the signs, the way Zeke's eyes would light up with that terrible hunger when he looked at Eliza. "He gonna kill her one of these days," the field hands whispered. "Ain't no way a body can take that much dying and keep living." But Eliza endured. Lord have mercy, how she endured. Her throat was a mass of scar tissue now, voice reduced to a permanent rasp that sounded like wind through a graveyard. She couldn't sing no more, couldn't even speak above a whisper, but her eyes blazed with a fire that grew hotter with each strangling, fed by rage and loss and the promise of eventual retribution. At night, when the physical pain was worst, Auntie Ruth would come with her healing conjure. She'd apply poultices made from comfrey root and slippery elm, draw protective symbols on Eliza's chest with consecrated oils, whisper prayers that mixed Yoruba and English into something powerful and ancient. "How you still alive, child?" Auntie Ruth asked one evening, her weathered hands gentle on Eliza's damaged throat. "Most folks would have passed to the ancestors by now. What keeping you here?" Eliza's whisper came out like dried leaves rustling. "Hate. Pure, clean hate. It sustained me better than any food. Hate, a dangerous thing to feed on," the old conjure woman warned. "It can consume you from the inside." "Let it," Eliza rasped. "Long as I live long enough to see Zeke suffer like he made me suffer. Long as I can make him pay for every strangling, every loss, every moment of this hell." By the time the count reached 75, Eliza had learned to control her body's response to the rope. She'd go limp immediately, conserving oxygen, letting her mind drift to that place between worlds where her mama and the ancestors waited. They'd speak to her in those moments of near death, showing her visions of what was to come, filling her with strength to endure just one more day. "Your time coming," her mama's spirit would say. "Your vengeance building like a storm. Every strangling makes you stronger, tempers your soul like steel and fire. Hold on, daughter, hold on." Isaiah watched helplessly as the woman he loved was tortured daily. The loss of Jeremiah had broken something in him too, and he started taking risks, sabotaging equipment, stealing food from the big house, teaching other enslaved folks to read using scraps of newspaper hidden in the quarters. It was small rebellion, but rebellion nonetheless. "You gonna get yourself killed," Eliza warned him one night, her damaged voice barely audible. "Zeke already watching you close." "I don't care," Isaiah said, his young face aged by suffering. "I can't just stand by and do nothing. Not after they took our boy, not while he's strangling you every damn day." "Then be smart about it," Eliza whispered fierce. "Don't waste your life on gestures. Save your strength for when it matter, for when we can truly strike back." 100 stranglings came and went. Zeke celebrated by making it worse, hoisting Eliza higher, holding her longer, sometimes leaving her unconscious and near death before cutting her down. The field hands were forced to watch, a reminder to everyone what defiance cost. But instead of breaking their spirits, it fed a quiet rage that spread through the quarters like wildfire under ash. "That woman's stronger than any of us," Brother Moses said at the Hush Harbor one night. "She carrying our suffering, bearing witness to our pain. The ancestors chosen her for something, mark my words." During the 100th strangling, something extraordinary happened. Eliza's body went limp as usual, her spirit drifting toward that in-between place, but this time she went deeper. She found herself standing in a clearing that existed outside time, where the ancestors gathered. Her mama, Amma, her daddy, Kofi, the root doctor from the slave ship, and countless others stretching back through generations to Africa itself. "Why?" Eliza's voice worked perfect here, whole and strong. "Why must I suffer so much? Why can't I just die and be free?" The root doctor stepped forward, his milky eyes somehow seeing everything. Because you, the instrument of justice, child. Every strangling, every loss, every moment of pain. It all got purpose. You being forged into something that can break chains. Not just your own, but others too. The spirits got plans and you at the center. I'm just one woman, Eliza protested. Broken, damaged, powerless. You survived 100 deaths, her mama interrupted. You still standing when others would have fallen. That ain't powerless, that divine strength wearing human skin. Trust the process, daughter. Trust the hate that keeps you alive, but don't let it consume your humanity. Use it. Control it. Aim it like a weapon when the time come. She woke gasping on the ground, Auntie Ruth's face hovering above her, tears streaming down the old woman's weathered cheeks. You was gone so long, Auntie Ruth sobbed. I thought this time you wasn't coming back. But Eliza had come back, and she came back different. The 100th strangling had been a baptism of sorts, a crossing over into something beyond mere survival. She understood now what the ancestors were preparing her for, even if she didn't know the details yet. The count continued. 120, 150, 175. Each strangling a prayer, a curse, a promise. Zeke thought he was breaking her, but he was actually creating the weapon that would eventually destroy him. He was too drunk on power to see it, too convinced of his own invincibility to recognize the danger growing in Eliza's silence. By the 200th strangling, Eliza had stopped feeling fear entirely. She'd walked to that oak tree calm as Sunday morning, let Zeke put the noose around her neck without flinching, and when she came back from the edge of death, her eyes would find his with such cold promise, it made even him uncomfortable. "You looking at me strange, girl," he said once, trying to sound threatening but coming out uncertain. "Like you know something I don't." Eliza's whisper was soft as snakes sliding through grass. "I know you're gonna pay, Captain. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But the ancestors keeping count, and the bill always come due." Zeke laughed it off, but something in her certainty shook him. He increased the strangling's frequency, trying to reassert control, but each one just made Eliza more dangerous, more focused, more inevitable. The quarters whispered about her at night, about the woman who wouldn't die, who'd been strangled 200 times and counting, who carried suffering like a sword being sharpened for battle. Children were told her story as both warning and inspiration. The elders saw her as a sign that change was coming, that the long night of bondage would eventually break into dawn. And Eliza, she waited, counted, remembered every face of every child sold away, every scream from the whipping post, every spiritual sung in the hush harbor. She was becoming living testimony, a witness to atrocity who would one day bear witness with blood and fire. The ancestors whispered their approval in her dreams, and the rope around her neck became not a symbol of oppression, but a reminder of debts owed and vengeance earned. Life got a cruel way of offering hope just so it can snatch it away again. 3 years after losing Jeremiah, when Eliza was 26 and her body bore the scars of 240 stranglings, she found herself carrying another child. This time the father was Isaiah, and this time they dared to dream, foolish as that was, that maybe, just maybe, this baby would be different. "We could run," Isaiah whispered one night in the quarters, his hand gentle on Eliza's growing belly. "Take the Underground Railroad north before the baby come. I heard tell there's conductors operating out of Mobile, folks who'll hide us and guide us to freedom." Eliza wanted to believe. Lord, how she wanted to believe. But she'd learned the hard lessons of hope deferred, knew that running pregnant through hostile country with paddy rollers and bloodhounds on your trail was near impossible. Still, the dream warmed her like stolen sunshine. "Let's see how it go," she rasped, her damaged voice making every word precious. Maybe the ancestors got other plans. The baby came in late summer, when the cotton was high and the heat near unbearable. Another difficult birth, but this time, Eliza was ready, knew what to expect. Bore down with the strength of a woman who'd survived hundreds of small deaths. When the midwife placed the baby in her arms, she wept. It was a girl, perfect and beautiful. with Isaiah's kind eyes and Eliza's fierce spirit already showing in the way she gripped her mama's finger. "Sarah," Eliza whispered, naming her after a woman in the Bible who laughed when God promised her the impossible. "Sarah, my impossible blessing." The quarters celebrated that night despite exhaustion, despite the ever-present fear. Folks brought what little they had: a sweet potato saved from rations, a flower picked from the edge of the field, a song hummed soft so the overseers wouldn't hear. Sarah became the community's child, passed from arms to arms, blessed by the elders, protected by conjure charms sewn into her blanket by Auntie Ruth. "This one's special," Auntie Ruth declared, examining the baby with her wise old eyes. "Got the mark of destiny on her. She gonna see things we can't even imagine." For 2 years, Eliza knew something approaching happiness. Sarah grew fat and healthy, learning to walk and talk, her laughter like bells ringing in the heavy air of bondage. Eliza would carry her to the fields wrapped against her back, working her cotton row while singing soft spirituals that Sarah would try to echo in her baby voice. Isaiah carved toys for his daughter from wood scraps, taught her to count using cotton bowls, told her stories about freedom land up north where black folks could walk without fear, own property, read books, be fully human. Dangerous stories, but necessary ones. "One day, baby girl," Isaiah would whisper, "one day you're gonna live in that free land. You're gonna grow up knowing your own name, your own worth, your own power." But Zeke watched. He always watched. And as Sarah grew from baby to toddler to a child of uncommon beauty, his eyes began to linger in ways that made Eliza's blood run cold. She recognized that look, the same covetous, possessive hunger he'd shown toward her, now directed at her daughter. "Keep Sarah close," Auntie Ruth warned. "That devil got plans and they ain't righteous ones." When Sarah turned 12, tall for her age, beautiful in a way that drew dangerous attention, Zeke made his move. He approached Eliza in the field one scorching afternoon, that serpent smile on his scarred face. "Your girl getting to be a woman," he said, his voice oily with false friendliness. Massa Harrington noticed her, thinking about making her a house servant, training her up proper. Every alarm in Eliza's body went off. House servant for a girl that beautiful meant only one thing. She'd be available to the master and his sons, her body considered property they could use however they pleased. It was slavery's special cruelty toward women, the double bondage of being both laborer and sexual object with no right to refuse. "She worked good in the fields, Captain," Eliza rasped, trying to keep desperation out of her voice. "She learning fast, picking her weight already." "I wasn't asking your opinion," Zeke cut her off. "I was telling you what's gonna happen, unless," he paused, that terrible smile widening, "unless you want to work out some other arrangement. You've been resisting me for years, Eliza. Maybe it's time you learn to be more accommodating." The threat hung in the air between them, ugly and explicit. Zeke was offering a devil's bargain: submit to him, and he'd protect Sarah from the big house. Refuse, and her daughter would be thrown to wolves in fine clothes. Eliza's mind raced. She looked at Zeke, this man who'd strangled her nearly 300 times, who'd sold her son, who embodied everything evil about the system that enslaved them. The thought of letting him touch her made her stomach revolt. But Sarah, sweet Sarah, who still believed in her mama's ability to protect her, who didn't yet understand the full horror of what awaited women in bondage. "I need time," Eliza whispered, "to think on it." "You got till tomorrow," Zeke said. Then she goes to the big house one way or another. That night, Eliza held a council with Isaiah and Auntie Ruth in the darkest corner of the quarters, their voices barely whispers beneath the sound of crickets and distant hound dogs. "We run," Isaiah said immediately. "Tonight, all of us, take Sarah and head north before he can touch her." "They'll catch us before we reach the county line," Eliza countered, her damaged voice heavy with bitter knowledge. "And the punishment for running with a child? They'll sell Sarah south for sure. Maybe sell her to a fancy house in New Orleans. At least here we can still see her, still try to protect her." "Protect her how?" Isaiah's voice broke. "By letting that devil own you? By sacrificing yourself while our daughter still ends up in the big house anyway? There might be another way, Auntie Ruth said slowly. A conjure. Strong one, dangerous one. Make Zeke sick enough he can't function, but not so sick it points back to us. Buy time at least. Maybe change the situation entire. Do it, Eliza said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. But even as they plotted, Eliza knew deep in her bones that this was a battle they couldn't win. The system was too strong, too entrenched, designed specifically to strip enslaved people of any power to protect those they loved. Still, she had to try. Sarah was her heart walking outside her body, and she'd endure anything, even Zeke's violation, if it meant keeping her daughter safe. The next morning, before Eliza could make her terrible decision, Massa Harrington made it for her. He'd received an offer from a plantation owner in Georgia. Excellent price for a light-skinned girl of Sarah's age and beauty. The kind of price that was too good to refuse, especially for a man drowning in gambling debts. Eliza was in the field when Big Jim came to deliver the news, his face twisted with grief that mirrored her own. "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate for the magnitude of loss. "So sorry. The traitor coming this afternoon." The world tilted. Eliza's knees buckled, and she fell into the dirt between cotton rows, a sound tearing from her damaged throat that was beyond screaming, beyond weeping, a pure expression of agony that made the ancestors themselves pause in their celestial business to witness a mother's heartbreaking. Sarah was torn away that very afternoon, her screams echoing across the plantation as the trader's wagon carried her off. Eliza fought like a wild thing, clawing and biting until 4 men had to hold her down. The last image she had of her daughter was Sarah's tear-stained face looking back, her small hand reaching toward her mama, her voice crying out one word over and over, "Mama, mama, mama!" Then she was gone, swallowed by distance and the insatiable hunger of an economy built on human suffering. Isaiah found Eliza that night lying motionless in the dirt outside the quarters, eyes open but seeing nothing, her damaged voice silent for the first time since the stranglings began. He carried her inside, and for 3 days she didn't speak, didn't eat, didn't acknowledge the world around her. It was as if losing Sarah had finally accomplished what 300 stranglings couldn't. It had killed something essential in her. But on the 4th day, Eliza rose. Her eyes were different now, empty of everything except cold purpose. She walked to where Auntie Ruth kept her conjure supplies and spoke in her rasping whisper. "Teach me," she said. "Teach me every curse, every hex, every way to make a man suffer. No more waiting, no more enduring, it's time." And in that moment, Zeke's fate was sealed, though he didn't know it yet. The count climbed like a man ascending gallows steps, slow, inevitable, each number another nail in a coffin that refused to close. 210, 215, 220. After losing Sarah, Zeke intensified his campaign of torture, as if he could somehow strangle out the last remnants of Eliza's humanity. But he'd miscalculated terrible. Each rope burn, each moment of oxygen deprivation, each dance with death only hardened what remained of her into something beyond human feeling, a creature of pure purpose wrapped in scarred flesh. By the time strangling number 225 came around, Eliza had stopped being a woman and become a warning. The field hands whispered her name like a prayer or a curse, depending on their faith in divine justice. Children were told, "Be like Eliza, survive what tries to kill you." The elders saw her as proof that the ancestors hadn't abandoned them, that resistance could take forms beyond rebellion and flight. Eliza's voice was gone now, completely destroyed. She communicated through gestures, through written words scratched in dirt, through eyes that spoke volumes her damaged throat couldn't. But the silence made her more powerful somehow, like the quiet before a storm that you feel in your bones before the first thunder rolls. Auntie Ruth had been teaching her the deep conjure, the kind that required blood and bone, sacrifice and risk. They'd meet in the dead of night at the crossroads, where the dirt road split toward freedom and bondage, where the spirit world pressed close against the living one. "You sure about this path?" Auntie Ruth asked. her old hands preparing ritual items, goofer dust mixed with Zeke's hair stolen from his cabin, red flannel soaked in Eliza's blood, graveyard dirt taken from a murderer's grave. This kind of working, it changes you. Might get what you want, but you won't never be the same. Eliza's eyes said everything her voice couldn't. I'm already changed. Already lost everything that made me soft. Might as well become the weapon they forged. She learned to make mojo bags that could bring sickness, to prepare hot foot powder that would drive a person mad with restlessness, to curse names written on paper and burned with specific herbs. But more than conjure, Auntie Ruth taught her patience. How to wait like a spider in its web, how to let your enemy think he's winning right up until the moment you strike. Revenge a dish best served cold, the old conjure woman said. And you've been cooling yours for near 15 years now. When you finally act, it's gonna freeze hell itself. During this time, Eliza discovered something that changed everything. She'd learned to read. Isaiah had been teaching her secretly for years, using scraps of newspaper, pages torn from books stolen from the big house, words scratched in dirt and memorized. It was illegal, punishable by whipping or worse. But Eliza devoured knowledge like a woman starving. She read about Nat Turner's rebellion in Virginia, how enslaved folks had risen up and fought back, killing masters in their beds before being crushed by overwhelming force. She read newspaper accounts of the Underground Railroad, of conductors like Harriet Tubman who'd made 19 trips south and never lost a passenger. She read advertisements for runaway slaves, seeing the desperate measures white folks took to maintain their human property. And she read something that would haunt her. A notice about a girl matching Sarah's description being sold at a fancy house auction in Savannah. Her daughter, reduced to an object in the marketplace of flesh and degradation. The rage that rose in Eliza was biblical, apocalyptic, the kind that could burn the world down and dance in the ashes. One evening, hidden in the quarters with a stub of candle and a newspaper from 3 weeks prior, she found an article about the growing abolitionist movement up north. White folks and free blacks organizing against slavery, writing books and giving speeches, creating the political pressure that might one day end this hell. It gave her something she thought she'd lost: hope. Not for herself, maybe, but for a future where children like Jeremiah and Sarah wouldn't be born into bondage. But even as hope flickered, suffering continued its relentless march. Strangling number 225 was different from the others. Zeke, sensing something had shifted in Eliza but unable to identify what, decided to make an example. He gathered the entire plantation, field hands, house servants, even the children, forcing everyone to watch. "This here's what happens to the uppity ones," he shouted, whiskey on his breath even though it was barely noon. "This woman thought she was special. Thought she could look at me with them hateful eyes and I wouldn't notice. Well, I'm gonna strangle that hate right out." The noose went around Eliza's neck, familiar as an old lover's touch by now. But this time Zeke pulled her higher than usual, held her longer, let her dangle until her face turned purple and foam flecked her lips. The watching crowd gasped, certain they were witnessing her actual death this time. In that extended moment of strangulation, Eliza's spirit left her body completely. She found herself in a vast space filled with ancestors stretching back through time. Not just her bloodkin, but all the enslaved dead. All the souls who'd perished in the Middle Passage. All the ones who died in fields and on auction blocks and under whips. They surrounded her, a congregation of suffering that had transcended into something powerful. "Your time is near," they spoke with one voice. 225 deaths survived. 225 reasons for retribution. When you reach 450, when the count is complete, then you strike. Not before. The power builds with each strangling. The justice accumulates like interest on a debt. Wait for the fullness of time. "But I'm dying," Eliza protested, feeling her physical body failing far below. "You've been dying for 15 years, the ancestors replied. "What's a few more? Trust the process. Trust the hate that sustains you. And when the 450th strangling comes, you'll know exactly what to do." Zeke cut her down finally, and Eliza crashed back into her body like a soul thrown into hell. She gasped, choked, vomited blood onto the Alabama dirt. The watching crowd thought she was finished, but then, impossibly, she stood. Legs shaking, vision blurred, throat on fire. But she stood, and she looked at Zeke. Really looked at him, with eyes that had seen beyond death and come back with terrible knowledge. For the first time in all their years of conflict, Zeke flinched. Something in her gaze promised things worse than any strangling, spoke of retribution that would echo through generations. "What you looking at, girl?" Zeke tried to bluster, but his voice cracked slightly. Eliza pointed at him slowly, deliberately. Then she drew her finger across her throat in an unmistakable gesture. The message was clear even without words. Your time is coming. That night, Zeke drank himself into a stupor, trying to shake the feeling that he'd seen his own death in an enslaved woman's eyes. And maybe he had. Maybe in that moment between Strangling's 225 and 226, Zeke's fate had been sealed as surely as if it was written in blood. Meanwhile, Eliza sat with Auntie Ruth and Isaiah in the quarters, her silence more eloquent than any speech. She'd reached the halfway point of her prophesied suffering. 225 Stranglings survived, 225 more to endure before the ancestors released her to act. It seemed impossible, but then again, everything about her survival was impossible. "You really gonna wait for 450? Isaiah whispered, holding her scarred hand. "You really gonna let him strangle you 225 more times?" Eliza nodded slowly, because she understood now what the ancestors were building. Not just revenge, but justice. Not just personal retribution, but a reckoning that would shake the foundations of Harrington Plantation. Every strangling was a brick in the wall of accumulated debt, and when that wall finally fell, it would crush everything beneath it. She was halfway to freedom, halfway to vengeance, halfway to becoming the instrument of divine wrath that would make Zeke's final days a preview of hell itself. And the count would continue. 226, 227, each number a step closer to the moment when the strangled would become the strangler, when the tortured would become the terrible, when justice, delayed but not denied, would finally come calling with blood on its hands. Hope got a way of sneaking back even when you think you done killed it permanent. 2 years after Sarah was torn away, when Eliza was 31 and had survived 275 stranglings, she felt that familiar flutter in her belly again. This time it was different, stronger, more insistent, like two hearts beating where there should be one. Auntie Ruth confirmed it with her knowing hands and spirit sight. "Twins," she declared, her weathered face breaking into the first genuine smile Eliza had seen in years. Boy and girl, strong as iron, blessed by the ancestors. They saying this your last chance at joy before the final reckoning. Isaiah wept when he heard, tears of joy mixed with bone-deep fear. They'd lost 2 children already to the auction block's cruel hunger. The thought of losing 2 more, and twins at that, which would fetch premium prices, was almost more than his heart could bear. "We run this time," he said fiercely, his hands cradling Eliza's growing belly. "Soon as they born and strong enough to travel, we take the Underground Railroad north. I don't care if we die trying. At least we die free together." But Eliza had learned the bitter arithmetic of slavery. Running pregnant was near impossible. Running with newborn twins was suicide. The paddy rollers had bloodhounds that could track a scent through swamp water, and rewards for returned runaways had gotten high enough that even poor whites would turn in their own kin for the money. Still, she let Isaiah dream. Let herself dream too in the quiet hours before dawn when anything seemed possible. The pregnancy was hard, her body worn down from years of abuse and malnutrition. The stranglings continued. Zeke showed no mercy for her condition, though he was careful not to damage Mass's investment too severely. By strangling number 300, Eliza's body had become a map of suffering, but the babies inside her kicked strong and defiant, as if they already understood the world they was entering, and was determined to fight it. The twins came in early spring, when the dogwoods bloomed white as lies and the cotton fields awaited their annual baptism of blood and sweat. Eliza labored through a night and day, her damaged voice unable to scream but her body expressing agony in other ways. Auntie Ruth worked her conjure alongside her midwifery, calling on every ancestor and spirit to guide these babies safe into the world. "Push, daughter," the old woman commanded. "Push like you pushing away every chain, every whip, every sorrow. These children gonna be warriors." First came the boy, small but fierce, his cry strong enough to wake the dead. Then his sister, even smaller but with eyes that seemed to see straight through to the truth of things. Isaiah held them both, tears streaming down his face. And Eliza, despite her exhaustion, despite knowing what awaited, felt something like peace settle over her damaged heart. "Jacob," she rasped, naming the boy after the patriarch who wrestled with God. And Zipporah, naming the girl after Moses' wife who'd stood strong in exile. The quarters celebrated quiet-like, bringing gifts they couldn't afford. A scrap of cloth for swaddling, a carved wooden toy, a prayer whispered over the babies' heads. The twins became symbols of resistance through mere existence, proof that life persisted even in hell's hottest furnace. For 6 precious months, Eliza knew something approaching happiness. She'd strap the twins to her chest and back while working the fields, their small bodies warm against hers, their baby sounds mixing with the work songs the field hands sang. Isaiah would carve toys during the brief rest periods, teaching Jacob and Zipporah their names, their heritage, their worth as human beings created in God's image. But Massa's debts never slept, and the slave trader's wagon was always hungry. When the twins was barely walking, 10 months old, just starting to say mama and dada, Harrington made his coldest calculation yet. Twins fetched extraordinary prices at auction, especially healthy ones from proven breeding stock. And his gambling debts had reached crisis point. Eliza was in the field when she saw the trader arrive, and she knew. Lord God, she knew before anyone said a word. Her body went cold despite the Alabama heat. Her damaged voice tried to scream but only produced a broken rasp. She ran toward the quarters where the twins had been left with an elderly woman too sick to work the fields. But she was too late. Always too late. The trader had already loaded Jacob and Zipporah into his wagon, their small faces confused, not yet understanding they was being stolen. When they saw their mama running toward them, they reached out their tiny hands, calling for her in their baby voices. "Mama! Mama!" Eliza threw herself at the wagon, clawing at the wooden sides, trying to climb in, trying to reach her babies. The trader struck her with his whip. Big Jim pulled her back crying, and Zeke watched it all with that damned serpent smile, enjoying her suffering like it was fine wine. "No!" Eliza's destroyed voice managed to form words through sheer force of anguish. "Not both. Please God, not both. Take me instead. Kill me, but leave them." But God wasn't listening that day. Or maybe he was listening and weeping, but powerless before the machinery of human evil. The wagon pulled away, wheels crunching on gravel, carrying Jacob and Zipporah toward a future of bondage and separation. The last thing Eliza heard was their crying, gradually fading into distance until even that small mercy was stolen. Isaiah found her hours later, lying in the dirt outside the quarters, her eyes open but seeing nothing. She'd clawed at her own throat until it bled, trying to finish what Zeke's rope had started so many times. He gathered her into his arms, and they wept together. 2 parents who'd now lost 3 children to the insatiable hunger of an economy built on stolen lives. "I can't do this no more," Isaiah sobbed. "I can't live in a world this cruel, I can't." But Eliza grabbed his face with hands still bloody from clawing her throat, forced him to look at her. Her eyes held something beyond grief now, something cold and final as a tombstone. She couldn't speak, but she didn't need to. Isaiah understood. "The 450th strangling," he whispered. "You still gonna wait?" Eliza nodded. Because the ancestors had shown her the path and she'd walked too far down it to turn back now. 75 more stranglings to endure, 75 more small deaths to survive, and then she would become the reckoning that Zeke and Harrington and this whole wicked system had coming. That night, Strangling number 301 came. Zeke, drunk on power and whiskey, strung her up for abandoning her workstation when she'd run to save her children. Eliza didn't fight it this time. She let the rope take her, let the darkness come, and in that space between life and death, she made a vow. Jacob, Zipporah, Sarah, Jeremiah. Every child stolen, every mother's wail, every tear shed on auction blocks from Virginia to Louisiana. I carry you all. And when I strike, it won't be just for me. It'll be for every soul this system has devoured. The ancestors heard her vow and sealed it with power, older than slavery, older than America, old as Africa itself. When Eliza came back from that strangling, something fundamental had changed. She'd touched the bottom of suffering's well and found solid ground there, a foundation of rage so pure and cold it could support the weight of apocalypse. 75 stranglings remained, 75 steps closer to the moment when the meek would inherit the earth by setting it on fire. The loss of the twins broke something in the quarters that couldn't be mended with conjure or prayer. Folks had watched Eliza lose 4 children now to the auction block's hunger, had counted 300 stranglings that should have killed her but didn't, had witnessed suffering that would have broken lesser souls. And they was getting tired, bone-deep, soul-sick tired of enduring without fighting back. Brother Moses was the first to speak what others was thinking. At the Hush Harbor one moonless night, with Spanish moss hanging like ghosts from the cypress trees and the bayou whispering its dark secrets, he stood before the gathered enslaved folks and spoke words that could get them all killed. How long? His voice rolled like thunder across the clearing. How long we gonna bow our heads and take the whip? How long we gonna watch our children sold away like cattle? How long before we say enough? The crowd stirred, dangerous energy crackling through them like lightning before a storm. Eliza sat silent in the shadows, her damaged throat unable to speak but her eyes burning with that cold fire that had become her trademark. Isaiah stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, the other clenched into a fist. Nat Turner tried rising up in Virginia, someone called out nervously. They killed him and 60 others, hung their bodies as warnings. Denmark Vesey tried in Charleston, another added. Betrayed before he could strike. They executed 35 souls. So we do nothing, Brother Moses challenged. We just accept this living death? I'm old now, got maybe 5 years left if I'm lucky. I'd rather die fighting than die slow in these fields, my back bent permanent from masses cotton. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. The younger folks especially, those who'd grown up knowing nothing but bondage but hearing whispered tales of freedom land up north. They was hungry for action, for resistance that went beyond stolen food and broken tools. There's word coming down the Underground Railroad, a woman named Ruth Ann said quietly. She was a house servant who overheard things, picked up information from masses newspapers and conversations. Abolitionists getting stronger up north. Some white folks actually fighting against slavery now, writing books, giving speeches. Things changing slow, but they changing. Too slow for us, Isaiah said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. My children gone, Eliza's voice destroyed. How many more got to suffer while we wait for white folks to decide we human? The group fell silent, the weight of that question pressing down like Alabama humidity. It was Auntie Ruth who spoke next, her ancient voice carrying wisdom and warning both. Rebellion comes in many forms, she said. Sometimes it's the sword and fire. Sometimes it's the slow poison that weakens from within. Sometimes it's one person standing tall when everyone else bends, becoming a symbol that inspires others long after they're gone. All eyes turned to Eliza. She sat there in the darkness, scars visible even in the dim light of hidden lanterns. The rope burns around her neck, the whip marks on her back, the brand on her shoulder. But what struck folks most was her eyes, windows to a soul that had been tempered in fires hot enough to forge something unbreakable. Brother Moses approached her, knelt in the dirt before her. Sister Eliza, he said formally, using her full name like a title of respect. You done suffered more than any 10 of us combined. You got wisdom we need, what you think we should do. Eliza couldn't speak. her voice destroyed by 300 stranglings. But she'd learned to read and write in secret, and now she scratched words in the dirt with a stick. Letters formed slow but deliberate. Wait. Prepare. When time come, strike hard. Wait for what? Someone asked. Wait till we all dead or sold away? Eliza wrote again. My time comes at 4:50. Then fire. The number meant nothing to most there, but Isaiah and Auntie Ruth understood. 150 more stranglings to survive, and then Eliza would fulfill whatever destiny the ancestors had shown her. And when she moved, she'd move with the accumulated power of 450 deaths survived. That could be 2, 3 more years, a young man protested. I can't wait that long, I won't. Brother Moses stood, his old body straightening with authority. Then you go now, he said bluntly. Take the Underground Railroad, head north, seek your freedom. Ain't nobody gonna stop you or blame you. But understand this. Individual escape ain't the same as collective liberation. We need both. We need folks who run and folks who stay and resist from within. The meeting broke into smaller conversations, people debating paths forward. Some talked seriously about running, making plans for the dangerous journey north. Others discussed subtler resistance. How to slow work without getting caught, how to sabotage equipment, how to pass information between plantations about cruel overseers and kind ones, about which masters was selling and which was keeping families together. Eliza sat apart from it all, writing more words in the dirt for those who gathered close. Zeke is mine. When I strike him, whole plantation will shake. Be ready. You gonna kill him? Isaiah whispered, though he already knew the answer. Eliza's smile was terrible to behold, not joyful but cold as a January grave. She nodded once, definitive. Over the following weeks, the plantation hummed with suppressed energy. Zeke felt it too, grew more paranoid and vicious in response. He increased patrols, tightened restrictions, punished perceived infractions with savage enthusiasm. The stranglings accelerated. 310, 315, 320. Each one meant to break resistance, but each one only hardened resolve. News reached them in fragments, whispered from plantation to plantation by those brave or foolish enough to carry information. Stories of successful escapes up north, of conductors on the Underground Railroad getting bolder, of abolitionist violence in Kansas, where anti-slavery and pro-slavery forces was literally going to war. The old order was cracking, and even those most oppressed could feel it. Something coming, Auntie Ruth said one evening, reading signs in chicken bones and patterns of smoke. Big change on the horizon. Blood gonna flow like rivers before it's done, but on the other side, freedom. Real freedom, not just for the few who escape, but for all our people. When? Isaiah asked, desperate for hope. Soon, the old conjure woman replied. Soon as we willing to pay the price. Meanwhile, Eliza prepared in her own way. She memorized the layout of the big house from Isaiah's descriptions. He'd been assigned work there briefly, knew which rooms connected, where the master slept, where weapons was stored. She practiced moving silent through the quarters at night, learning to walk without sound despite her weakened body. She studied Zeke's patterns, when he drank heaviest, when he was most vulnerable, where he kept his bullwhip and pistol, and she made conjure bags with Auntie Ruth's guidance, not for protection this time, but for vengeance. Goofer dust mixed with Zeke's hair and nail clippings, red flannel soaked in menstrual blood and graveyard dirt, words of power written on parchment in dove's blood ink, every ingredient gathered under specific moon phases, every incantation spoken with focused hate. This ain't light work you doing, Auntie Ruth warned. This the dark conjure, the kind that stains your soul. You sure you want to carry this? Eliza's response was to scratch in dirt, already stained. Might as well use it. By strangling number 350, the whole plantation knew something was building. The air felt heavy with it, like the pressure before a tornado strikes. Enslaved folks began taking sides. Some wanted to wait and see, others wanted immediate action. A few even sided with the masters out of fear or beaten down submission. But increasingly, eyes turned to Eliza. The woman who wouldn't die. The mother who'd lost everything but kept standing. The silent witness to atrocity who would one day bear witness with blood and fire. She was becoming myth even while still living, a story being written in scars and suffering that would be told for generations. "When you strike," Brother Moses told her one night, "it won't just be for you, it'll be for all of us. Every child sold, every back whipped, every spirit broken. You carrying all that. Don't forget it." Eliza nodded, the weight of collective suffering settling on her shoulders like a mantle. 100 stranglings remained before the ancestors released her to act. 100 more small deaths before the real dying began. Not hers, but Zeke's. And maybe everyone else's too if the rebellion spread like wildfire. The quarters whispered her name at night like a prayer. Eliza. Eliza of the Strangling. She gonna deliver us. And Eliza, silent and scarred. Let them believe. Because sometimes belief was all that kept folks alive, and she needed them alive to witness what was coming. The final 100 stranglings came faster than all the others combined, like Zeke could sense his time running short and wanted to pack in as much cruelty as possible before the reckoning. 360, 370, 380. The count climbed relentless as floodwater, and Eliza endured each one with the patience of stone weathering wind. But something had shifted in the dynamic between torturer and victim. Zeke, who'd always relished the power of the rope, now approached each strangling with something close to fear flickering in his pale eyes. Because Eliza had stopped showing any reaction at all. No fear, no pain, no pleading. She'd walk to that oak tree calm as Sunday morning, let him put the noose around her scarred neck, and when he pulled her up, her eyes would stay open, locked on his, promising things that made his whiskey-soaked dreams turn to nightmares. "What's wrong with you?" Zeke demanded one afternoon after strangling number 390. "Why don't you break? Any normal person would have broke by now." Eliza, her voice forever destroyed, simply smiled, and that smile was more terrifying than any scream could have been. It spoke of debts owed and soon to be collected, of patience rewarded, and vengeance earned through suffering. Zeke actually stepped back from her, his hand going to the pistol at his belt like she was dangerous even with the noose still around her neck. The field hands noticed. Massa Harrington noticed too, commented on it at dinner with his family, wondering aloud if maybe that girl Eliza had finally gone simple-minded from all the stranglings. But the enslaved folks knew better. Simple-minded people didn't have eyes that burned with cold fire, didn't move with the focused purpose of a predator stalking prey. "She waiting," folks whispered in the quarters, counting down to something, and when that count reaches its end, Lord have mercy on us all. Isaiah watched Eliza with growing concern and pride mixed together. The woman he loved had been transformed by suffering into something beyond human, a force of nature wrapped in scarred flesh, a reckoning given form and voice, even if that voice was silent as the grave. He wanted to protect her, but increasingly he understood she didn't need protection. She needed witnesses. "How close now?" he asked one night, holding her in the darkness of their cabin. Eliza held up her fingers. 6, then 0. 60 more stranglings to survive before the ancestors released her to act. 2 months, maybe 3 if Zeke paced himself. Isaiah did the math and felt his heart race. By late summer, maybe early fall, the 450th strangling would come. And then, "What happens after?" he whispered. "What happens when you done what you planning?" Eliza wrote in the dirt floor with her finger. Letters formed careful in the dim light. Freedom or death, no between. "Then we go together," Isaiah said firmly. "Whatever you do, wherever it leads, I'm with you." The stranglings continued their grim arithmetic. 400, 410, 420. Each one now witnessed by larger crowds because word had spread beyond Harrington Plantation. Enslaved folks from neighboring farms would find excuses to be near the property line when Eliza was scheduled to hang, wanting to see the woman who couldn't be killed, drawing strength from her impossible survival. Massa Harrington, always thinking about profit, started charging visitors to watch. 5 cents a viewing, turning Eliza's suffering into entertainment for poor whites who couldn't afford much else but could scrape together a nickel to watch a uppity slave get what she deserved. The irony wasn't lost on Eliza. Even her torture had been commodified, turned into profit for the system that enslaved her. But she used it. Oh, how she used it. Every strangling now became a performance. A sermon preached without words to everyone watching. Enslaved and free, black and white. She'd walk to that tree with her head high, let Zeke put the noose on, and when she was pulled up choking, her eyes would find the watching faces and speak volumes. See what they do to us. See and remember. And when the judgment comes, don't say you didn't know. By strangling 430, even some white folks in the crowd started feeling uncomfortable. There was something unsettling about watching a woman survive what should kill her. Something that poked at consciences they'd rather keep quiet. A few stopped coming. Others came more frequently, drawn by the same morbid fascination that makes folks stare at train wrecks. Zeke, drunk more often now, started making mistakes. He'd hold Eliza up too long and she'd pass out completely, requiring Auntie Ruth's conjure to revive her. He'd strangle her twice in one day out of sheer paranoid spite. He'd wake up from nightmares screaming, swearing he'd seen Eliza standing over his bed with hands reaching for his throat. "That girl hexed me," he complained to Massa Harrington. "She working rude against me, I know it. I can feel it in my bones." "You're drunk," Harrington replied dismissively. "She's just a slave girl. She can't hurt you." But Zeke knew better. He'd looked into Eliza's eyes enough times to see the truth there. She absolutely could hurt him, would hurt him, was just waiting for the right moment. He increased his drinking, started sleeping with a loaded pistol under his pillow, jumped at shadows. Meanwhile, Auntie Ruth prepared Eliza for what was coming. They'd meet at the crossroads on moonless nights, the old conjure woman teaching final lessons in the dark arts of retribution. "When the 450th strangling comes," Auntie Ruth instructed, "you'll be at the peak of spiritual power. All that suffering concentrated into a single moment. The ancestors will be with you, guiding your hands, lending you strength beyond normal human limits." She gave Eliza a special mojo bag, this one filled with the most powerful ingredients. High John the Conqueror root for victory, devil's shoestring to trip up enemies, dragon's blood for courage, and dirt from Nat Turner's gravesite that had been carried hundreds of miles by sympathetic hands. "Keep this close when the time comes," Auntie Ruth said. "It'll protect you and amplify your power. But remember, once you act, there ain't no going back. You'll have changed the world, but the world will change you right back." 440, 445. The final count approached like destiny walking on 2 legs. Eliza could feel the power building in her bones, could sense the ancestors gathering close, could almost taste the coming violence on her tongue like copper pennies. Strangling number 449 came on a Tuesday afternoon, hot and still, the air thick with the promise of thunderstorms. The crowd was largest it had ever been, maybe 50 people, enslaved and free, drawn by rumors that something significant was approaching. Zeke was nervous, his hands shaking as he put the noose around Eliza's neck. "Last chance to beg," he said, trying to assert dominance he no longer felt. "Last chance to show some humility." Eliza looked at him with those burning eyes and mouthed one word, silent but perfectly clear. "Tomorrow." Zeke stumbled backward like she'd struck him, because he understood, in that moment of terrible clarity, exactly what she meant. Tomorrow would be strangling number 450. Tomorrow would be the end of something and the beginning of something else. Tomorrow would be the day all his cruelty came due. That night, Zeke got more drunk than he'd ever been, trying to drown the fear that had taken root in his chest like a cancer. He passed out in his cabin with the pistol still in his hand, his dreams haunted by visions of rope and blood, and a woman with eyes that promised death. And Eliza? She sat in the quarters surrounded by her people, writing final instructions in the dirt for Isaiah, receiving blessings from the elders, making peace with whatever tomorrow would bring. She'd survived 449 stranglings, One more remained before the ancestors released her to act. One more death to survive before she could start dealing death to others. One more sunrise before the reckoning. The quarters was quiet that night, everyone sensing the weight of what approached. Children was kept inside, conjure bags was placed over doorways, prayers was whispered in every language the enslaved folks remembered. Yoruba, Igbo, Ashanti, broken English, all mixing together into a plea for justice, for protection, for the courage to witness what was coming. And in the big house, Massa Harrington slept peaceful, unaware that tomorrow his world would catch fire and burn to ash, that the empire he'd built on stolen backs was about to come crashing down. That judgment, delayed but never denied, was finally coming to call. Tomorrow was Strangling number 450. Tomorrow was the day Eliza stopped being victim and became vengeance incarnate. Tomorrow the strangled would strangle back. Morning came blood red, the Alabama sun rising like a wound in the sky. Eliza woke before dawn, her body knowing what her mind had long prepared for. Today was the 450th strangling. Today was the day the ancestors would release her from waiting, from enduring, from suffering in silence. Today was the beginning of the end. She moved through her morning routine calm as still water, but underneath, power coiled like a rattlesnake ready to strike. The mojo bag Auntie Ruth had prepared hung between her breasts, warm against her skin, pulsing with energy gathered from 449 near deaths. Every strangling had fed it. Every loss had strengthened it. Every moment of torture had concentrated into pure, focused purpose. The field hands watched her with knowing eyes as she walked to the cotton rows. They'd been told to work as normal, to give no sign that today was different, but everyone felt it. The pressure in the air like before a tornado, the way even the birds seemed quieter than usual, the heaviness of fate settling over the plantation like a shroud. Zeke arrived late, his eyes bloodshot from drinking, hands shaking as he mounted his horse. He'd spent the night trying to convince himself that his fear was foolish, that Eliza was just a damaged slave girl who couldn't hurt him. But when his eyes found her in the field, working her row with that eerie calm, dread seized his guts like a fist. "You!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Stop working and come here!" Eliza straightened slowly, dropped her cotton sack and walked toward him. Every step was deliberate, purposeful, like a priestess approaching an altar. The other field hands stopped working to watch, sensing something momentous about to unfold. "You've been looking at me strange for weeks now," Zeke said, trying to sound authoritative but coming out defensive. "Acting like you know something. Well, today I'm gonna strangle that attitude right out of you, permanent-like. This gonna be a lesson you won't forget." Eliza simply nodded, her scarred throat unable to speak but her eyes saying everything. "Yes, let's finish this." Zeke dismounted, grabbed her arm rougher than necessary, and dragged her toward the oak tree. The crowd that gathered was larger than ever. Word had spread somehow that today was significant. Enslaved folks from 3 neighboring plantations had found excuses to be nearby. Even some white onlookers showed up, drawn by the spectacle they'd come to expect. The noose went around Eliza's neck for the 450th time. Zeke pulled it tight, his hands trembling, sweat beading on his forehead despite the early morning cool. He looked into Eliza's eyes one last time before pulling the rope, and what he saw there made his bladder nearly let go. Not fear or pain or resignation, but certainty. The absolute knowledge that this was his last strangling, one way or another. "Any last words?" Zeke asked, the traditional question he'd asked 449 times before. Eliza's lips moved, forming words her destroyed voice couldn't speak, but Zeke read them clear enough. "See you in hell." He yanked the rope. Eliza's feet left the ground, and the noose crushed her windpipe as it had so many times before. But this time was different. This time, as her consciousness began to fade, she didn't fight it. She surrendered completely to the darkness, let herself fall through it like dropping through deep water, sinking down and down until she reached a place beyond death, beyond life, where the ancestors waited in a circle of fire and light. "It is time," they spoke with one voice. Her mama Amma, her daddy Kofi, the root doctor from the slave ship. and countless others stretching back through generations to the beginning of the diaspora. You have endured. You have survived. You have earned the right to strike. Go back now with our blessing and our power. Go back and make the earth remember this day. Eliza felt their hands on her, felt power flowing into her like water filling an empty vessel. Strength beyond human limits, rage purified by suffering, purpose forged in the fires of 450 stranglings. When she opened her eyes, she was still hanging from the rope, but she wasn't dying anymore. She was being reborn. Zeke had left her up longer than usual, wanting to make sure the lesson stuck. When he finally cut her down, she fell into the dirt and lay still. Too still. The crowd murmured nervously. Had he finally killed her? Had the 450th strangling been one too many? Get up! Zeke kicked her in the ribs. I said, get up! But Eliza didn't move, because she was waiting, conserving strength, letting Zeke think he'd won. She could hear the ancestors whispering instructions, could feel the mojo bag burning against her chest like a coal from hell's own fire. Not yet. Wait for the perfect moment. She dead, someone in the crowd whispered. Lord God, he finally killed her. Zeke's face went pale. Killing a slave meant answering to the master, meant lost property value, meant consequences he wasn't prepared for. He knelt beside Eliza, checking for breath, for pulse, finding both but weak. She alive, he announced with relief, just passed out. Somebody get water. That's when Eliza moved. Her eyes snapped open, and in one fluid motion that seemed impossible for someone who'd just been strangled, she grabbed Zeke's wrist. Her grip was iron, superhuman, powered by ancestral strength channeled through 450 deaths survived. Zeke tried to pull away, but he couldn't. Fear flooded his face as he realized he'd underestimated this woman for the last time. Eliza rose to her feet, still gripping his wrist, and for the first time in 15 years her voice worked, raspy and damaged but audible, speaking words that had been building for a decade and a half. No more, she said, each word scraped from a throat scarred by rope. No more strangling, no more suffering. Your turn now. She pulled him close, her other hand going to his throat, and Zeke screamed, a high, terrified sound that cut through the morning air like a blade. The crowd stood frozen, unable to process what they were witnessing. The victim becoming the victor, the tortured becoming the terrible. Please, Zeke begged, all his cruelty evaporating in the face of his own mortality. Please don't, I was just following orders, I didn't mean... But Eliza had heard enough begging over the years to last several lifetimes. She'd begged for her children and been ignored. She'd begged for mercy and received none. Now it was Zeke's turn to learn what it felt like to plead with someone who had no mercy left to give. The barn, she rasped. We finished this in the barn. And with strength that seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself, she began dragging Zeke toward the old tobacco barn at the edge of the field, while the crowd watched in stunned silence, and the ancestors sang victory songs that only Eliza could hear. The 450th strangling was over. Now came the reckoning. The tobacco barn stood at the edge of the cotton fields, a weathered structure that had witnessed its share of suffering over the years. Enslaved folks whipped inside its shadows, women violated in its dark corners, children hidden from slave traders among its rotting beams. Now it would witness something different, justice wearing the mask of vengeance. Eliza dragged Zeke inside with supernatural strength, the ancestral power still flowing through her veins like liquid fire. He fought, kicked, clawed at her hands, but she was beyond his ability to hurt now. 450 stranglings had made her something more than human, a force of nature given flesh, retribution incarnate. She threw him against the barn wall hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. Before he could recover, she was on him, her scarred hands going to his throat, pressing just hard enough to restrict breath but not kill. Not yet. Death would be too merciful, too quick. Zeke needed to understand suffering first, needed to taste the same terror he'd fed others for so many years. Please, Zeke gasped, his pale eyes wide with fear. Massa will kill you for this. They'll hang you, burn you alive. Already died, Eliza rasped, her damaged voice somehow more terrible for its brokenness. 450 times. What more are they gonna do to me? The truth of that settled over Zeke like a shroud. She was right. What punishment could they devise that was worse than what she'd already endured? What threat held meaning for someone who'd survived the unsurvivable? Eliza's hands moved to Zeke's face, forcing his mouth open. He realized what she intended and screamed, tried to bite, tried to twist away, but her strength was absolute. The ancestors guided her hands, the mojo bag burned against her chest, and years of accumulated rage found focus in this single act. "You strangled my voice," she whispered, her face inches from his. "You sold my children, you tortured me for sport, and through it all your tongue never stopped. Always cursing, always threatening, always reminding us we was property. No more. I'm taking what you used to destroy us." Her fingers found his tongue, gripping it tight despite his thrashing. The barn filled with his muffled screams, the sound of struggle, and then she pulled. Lord have mercy. She pulled with all the strength of 450 stranglings, all the rage of 4 children lost, all the accumulated suffering of 15 years. Flesh tore, blood sprayed hot and copper-smelling, and Zeke's tongue came free in her hand, ripped out by the roots. Zeke's scream became a gurgle, blood pouring from his mouth in a crimson flood. He collapsed to his knees, hands clutching his face, eyes rolling back from shock and agony. Eliza stood over him, holding his tongue like a trophy, her own destroyed voice speaking words he could barely hear through his pain. "How it feel?" she asked. "How it feel to lose your voice, to know you'll never speak again? To be marked permanent by what was done to you?" She dropped the severed tongue in the dirt and watched Zeke writhe in agony, his blood staining the barn floor. Part of her, the part that remembered being human, being merciful, wanted to end his suffering quickly. But the larger part, the part forged in torture's furnace, wanted him to survive this, wanted him to live with the consequences, to spend every remaining day of his life unable to speak, unable to threaten, forced to communicate in silence like she'd been forced to do. "You gonna live," Eliza said, backing toward the barn door. "Gonna live and remember every day what happens when you push someone too far. Gonna spend the rest of your miserable life tasting blood and thinking about the woman you couldn't break." She left him there, bleeding and broken, and stepped out into the bright Alabama morning. The field hands who'd followed at a distance stood frozen, staring at her blood-covered hands, at the righteous fury still burning in her eyes. Some looked horrified, others awed, but all understood they'd just witnessed something that would be talked about for generations. Isaiah pushed through the crowd, taking in the scene with wide eyes. "Eliza, what did you—" "Justice," she rasped. "Long overdue." But even as she spoke, she knew this was just the beginning. Taking Zeke's tongue satisfied something primal in her, but it didn't address the larger evil. The system that had enabled his cruelty still stood. The big house with its white columns, Massa Harrington sleeping peaceful in his feather bed, the whole plantation economy built on stolen labor and stolen lives. The ancestors whispered in her ear, their voices carried on the morning breeze. "Not done yet, finish what you started." Eliza looked toward the big house, visible in the distance, smoke rising from its chimneys as the kitchen slaves prepared breakfast for those who'd never missed a meal in their lives. She thought about all the wealth concentrated there, furniture bought with blood, silverware purchased with suffering, fine clothes woven from the cotton her people picked under the murderous sun. "It all gotta burn," she said quietly, but her words carried weight that made the listening crowd shiver. "Can't just punish one man when the whole system rotten. Gotta tear it down to the foundation." Auntie Ruth stepped forward, her ancient eyes blazing with approval. "You ready for what comes next? Ready to see this through to the end, knowing there ain't no going back?" Eliza nodded. "Been ready since they sold Jeremiah, since they strangled me the first time, since they brought my ancestors over in chains. I'm just the instrument, but the ancestors holding the bow, and they ready to shoot." Brother Moses raised his voice, speaking to the assembled crowd. "This day gonna be remembered. The day Eliza stopped being victim and became the sword of justice. Who stands with her? Hands rose slowly at first, then faster. Young men, old women, field hands, skilled workers. Folks who'd been waiting for someone brave enough to strike the first blow. Not everyone joined. Some was too scared, too beaten down, too conditioned to obedience. But enough did. Enough to matter. "We finish this today," Eliza said, her rasping voice carrying across the field. "We burn the big house. We free ourselves. And if we die doing it, at least we die on our feet instead of on our knees." The crowd roared approval, fear, and rage and hope mixing together into something explosive. Years of accumulated suffering had found its spark in Eliza's rebellion, and now it was ready to ignite into revolution. But before they could move toward the big house, an alarm bell started ringing. Someone had found Zeke in the barn, had raised the cry. Overseers and drivers was mobilizing, Massa was being alerted, and the brief window of surprise was closing fast. "Now!" Eliza shouted, her damaged voice rising above the chaos. "We move now, or we lose our chance." And with her blood-covered hands raised high like a prophet leading her people from bondage, Eliza turned toward the big house and began to run, the freed and the desperate following behind her, like a flood breaking through a dam, unstoppable and long overdue. The time for suffering was over. The time for fire had begun. The big house loomed white and pristine against the morning sky, a monument to stolen wealth and stolen lives. Eliza ran toward it with a crowd of rebels at her back, maybe 30 souls brave enough or desperate enough to follow her into what might be their last act on earth. Isaiah ran beside her. Brother Moses, despite his age, young folks who'd never known anything but bondage but dreamed of freedom, old ones who figured dying free beat living enslaved. They hit the big house like a storm, bursting through the kitchen door where the enslaved cooks screamed and scattered. Some joined the rebellion immediately, grabbing knives and skillets as weapons. Others fled, too terrified to choose sides. The house servants in the main rooms froze in confusion, their relatively privileged position suddenly worthless as the order they knew collapsed around them. Massa Harrington appeared at the top of the grand staircase in his night clothes, his face purple with rage and fear. "What is the meaning of this? Get back to your quarters immediately, or I'll have every last one of you whipped to death." Eliza stood at the bottom of the stairs, her blood-covered hands visible even in the dim interior light. Her scarred throat and rope-burned neck testament to 15 years of torture survived. When she spoke, her damaged voice carried such cold certainty it made Harrington step backward. "No more whipping," she rasped. "No more strangling. No more selling children. Your time is over." Harrington fumbled for the pistol he kept in his bedroom, but Isaiah was faster, throwing a heavy candlestick that caught the master in the shoulder and sent him sprawling. The sound of his body hitting the floor seemed to break whatever spell had held the rebels frozen. Suddenly, everyone was moving, grabbing anything that could burn, anything valuable that could be destroyed. "The lamp oil!" Brother Moses shouted, his old voice strong with righteous fury. "Every lantern, every lamp, gather it all." Eliza moved through the house like divine retribution, her hands collecting oil from the fine lamps that had lit dinner parties, where white folks laughed and planned their futures while the enslaved served in silence. She poured oil on the velvet curtains, on the expensive rugs brought from Persia, on the mahogany furniture that had cost more than a human life in the eyes of those who owned both. The mistress appeared, screaming about her belongings, about the law, about God's punishment for rebellion. But her screams meant nothing to folks who'd heard their own children scream when torn from their arms, who'd heard their own backs scream under the whip, who'd been screaming internally for generations while forced to smile and bow and say, "Yes, Massa." "Get out," Eliza told her coldly. "Take your family and run. I'm giving you more mercy than you ever gave us. A chance to escape with your lives." The mistress fled, gathering her children, her husband limping behind with blood streaming from his wounded shoulder. The house servants who'd remained loyal followed them out, unwilling or unable to cross the line from servant to rebel. That was fine. Eliza didn't need everyone. just enough to burn this symbol of oppression to ash. When the oil was spread throughout the house, Eliza stood in the grand parlor where Harrington had entertained guests, where deals had been struck over brandy to buy and sell human beings, where the profits of slavery had been counted and celebrated. She pulled out the mojo bag Auntie Ruth had prepared, held it high, and spoke a prayer that mixed her mama's Ashanti words with the Christianity forced on them, creating something new and powerful. "Ancestors, witness this," she rasped. "Every soul stolen from Africa, every back broken in these fields, every child sold away, every woman violated, every man worked to death. This fire is for you. This is remembrance. This is justice delayed, but not denied." She struck flint to steel, caught a piece of cloth on fire and touched it to the oil-soaked curtains. The flames caught immediately, spreading faster than seems possible, as if the house itself was eager to burn, as if 15 years of accumulated suffering had become fuel that made the fire burn hotter and brighter. The rebels poured out of the house as flames engulfed it, orange and red tongues licking up walls, shattering windows with the heat, consuming everything that represented the master's power. The sound was tremendous. Crackling, roaring, the groan of burning timbers, the crash of falling roof beams. Enslaved folks from the quarters came running, drawn by the smoke and flames. Some cheered, others wept. Many just stood in stunned silence watching the impossible. The big house burning, the symbol of their oppression reduced to fire and smoke. It was beautiful and terrible at once, apocalyptic in its finality. But Eliza knew what came next. The alarm had been raised. Neighboring plantation owners would be gathering their men, their weapons, their dogs. The militia would be called. This moment of rebellion would be brief, would likely end in blood and death, but it was worth it. Lord God, it was worth it just to see that house burn, to watch 15 years of suffering transform into purifying fire. Isaiah grabbed her hand. "We have to run now. Take what folks want to come and head for the swamps. We can hide there, maybe make it to the Underground Railroad." But Eliza shook her head. She'd known from the beginning how this would end. The ancestors had shown her in visions during those 450 stranglings. There was no escape for her, no peaceful ending after what she'd done. Taking Zeke's tongue and burning the big house had sealed her fate, as surely as if she'd signed her name in blood. "You run," she told Isaiah, her damaged voice gentle despite the chaos around them. "Take whoever will go and head north. Live free for both of us. Raise children who never know chains. Tell them about their mama who wouldn't break." "No," Isaiah's voice cracked. "I'm not leaving you. We do this together or not at all. You got to survive," Eliza insisted. "Someone got to live to tell this story, to make sure they remember what happened here. That's you. That's your purpose." The sound of hoofbeats thundered in the distance. The militia coming, armed men on horseback riding to restore order, to punish rebellion, to make examples of those who dared strike back. The moment was ending, reality crashing back like cold water. Eliza kissed Isaiah one last time, tasting salt from his tears, then pushed him toward the group of rebels preparing to flee into the swamps. "Go! Now! Don't make my sacrifice meaningless." Brother Moses grabbed Isaiah's arm, pulling him toward the tree line. "She right, son. We got to preserve the story, got to make sure this day lives in memory. Come on." As they disappeared into the undergrowth, Eliza turned back to the burning house. The flames reflected in her eyes, and she smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time in 15 years. She'd done it. She'd struck back. She'd transformed suffering into action, endurance into resistance, victim into victor. The militia arrived with guns and fury, surrounding the burning house, shouting orders, trying to round up the remaining enslaved folks who hadn't fled. When they saw Eliza standing alone before the inferno, blood on her hands and defiance in her eyes, they understood immediately who was responsible. "That's the one," someone shouted. "That's Eliza. She's the ringleader." They rushed her, grabbed her roughly, threw her to the ground. Rifle butts rained down on her back, fists struck her face, chains wrapped around her wrists. But through it all, Eliza laughed, a raspy, damaged sound that nonetheless carried triumph. "Worth it," she gasped through broken teeth and bleeding lips. "All worth it. You can kill me, but you can't unkill what I done. That house is ash. Zeke's tongue is gone. And the story gonna live forever." They dragged her away as the big house collapsed in on itself, sending sparks and embers into the morning sky like prayers ascending to heaven. The column of smoke could be seen for miles, a signal to every enslaved person in Alabama that resistance was possible, that the system wasn't invincible, that one woman's courage could shake foundations. Eliza didn't know if she'd live to see another sunrise, didn't much care anymore. She'd accomplished what the ancestors sent her to do, had transformed 450 stranglings into a fire that would burn in memory long after her body was dust. And in the swamps, running toward freedom, Isaiah carried her story with him, ready to tell it wherever he found ears willing to listen, ready to make sure the world remembered Eliza of the Strangling, the woman who survived the unsurvivable and burned down her master's house in righteous fury. Now listen here, child, 'cause this where the story gets strange, where history bleeds into legend, where what really happened mixes with what folks need to believe happened. The truth? Nobody knows for certain what became of Eliza after the militia dragged her away from that burning house. But the stories, Lord have mercy, the stories spread like wildfire through every plantation from Alabama to Virginia. Some say they hanged her right there in the town square as a warning to other rebellious souls, that she went to the gallows with her head high and that terrible smile on her scarred face, that her last words was a curse on every master and overseer in the South. Others swear the militia took her to the swamps to make an example, but she escaped into the cypress groves and Spanish moss, becoming something more than human, a haint that haunts the wicked, strangling evil men in their sleep. Isaiah made it north, settled in Philadelphia, and spent the rest of his days telling Eliza's story to anyone who'd listen. He spoke at abolitionist meetings, his voice cracking with emotion when he described the 450 stranglings, the children sold away, the tongue ripped out, the big house burning bright as Judgment Day. White folks thought he was exaggerating. Surely no one could survive that much suffering. But black folks knew better. They'd lived it, seen it, endured it themselves. She was real, Isaiah would insist, his eyes wet with tears and pride mixed together. Real as the scars on my back, real as the freedom I breathe now. And she didn't die, couldn't die. Too much spirit in her for death to hold permanent. The legend grew in the telling, as legends do. Enslaved folks throughout the South whispered about the woman of the Strangling who couldn't be killed, who'd torn out her torturer's tongue with her bare hands, who'd burned the master's house and disappeared into smoke like a conjure woman ascending to join the ancestors. They told their children, "Be brave like Eliza, endure like Eliza, and when the moment comes, strike like Eliza." Brother Moses survived too, guided dozens of souls along the Underground Railroad before his death at 93. On his deathbed, he swore he'd seen Eliza in the swamps years after her supposed execution, leading a group of runaways toward freedom, her neck still bearing those rope scars, but her eyes blazing with that unquenchable fire. "She ain't dead," he whispered to those gathered around. "She's become something else, a promise walking on two legs, a reminder that resistance lives eternal. Wherever there's suffering, wherever there's injustice, Eliza's spirit is there, whispering, 'Fight back. Don't break, survive, and strike.'" Auntie Ruth lived to see the end of slavery, witnessed the Jubilee when freedom finally came legal-like in 1865. She was 104 years old, blind but still sharp of mind, when young folks came asking about the old stories. She'd smile, her weathered face crinkling like ancient parchment, and confirm every word. "Eliza was real," she'd say. "I prepared her for battle, taught her the deep conjure, gave her the mojo bag that carried 450 deaths worth of power. And when she struck, child, the earth itself trembled." That wasn't just one woman's revenge. That was generations of suffering finding release. ancestors working through willing hands to balance scales that had been tipped wrong since the first slave ship touched these cursed shores. The big house never got rebuilt. The land where it stood remained scarred and empty, locals claiming it was haunted by the screams of those who'd suffered there, by the fire that had consumed it, by Eliza's laughter echoing across the years. Harrington lost everything: his wealth, his status, his mind eventually. He died in poverty, muttering about a woman with rope-burned neck and eyes that promised damnation. Zeke lived too, if you can call it living. Without his tongue, he couldn't give orders, couldn't threaten, couldn't wield the power that had defined him. He spent his remaining years as a pitiful figure, avoided by whites and mocked by blacks, a living testament to what happens when cruelty meets its match. Some say he went mad from the pain and the shame, died in an asylum screaming silent screams. But Eliza became eternal. Her story passed from generation to generation, carried in the oral tradition alongside spirituals and folk tales and memories of Africa. During the civil rights movement, protesters would invoke her name, draw strength from her example. When folks got tired, got scared, got ready to give up, someone would say, "Remember Eliza, remember the 450. And even now in this year 2025, her spirit walks among us. Every time someone stands up to injustice despite the cost, that's Eliza. Every time someone endures the unsurvivable and comes back stronger, that's Eliza. Every time the oppressed become the liberators, transforming suffering into power, that's Eliza's legacy living on. They say on quiet Alabama nights when the moon is dark and the wind blows through the old cotton fields, you can still hear her, that raspy voice damaged by 450 stranglings but never silenced, whispering to those with ears to hear, resist, endure. And when your moment comes, strike without mercy, for mercy was never shown to us. So carry this story, child. Carry it in your heart and your bones. Tell it to your children and your children's children. Let them know that once there was a woman named Eliza, who survived the unsurvivable, who turned torture into testimony, who burned down her master's house and freed not just herself, but the spirits of all who came before and all who came after. The chains may be gone, but the fight continues. Different forms, same struggle. And Eliza's fire, it still burns, waiting to ignite in the hearts of those brave enough to carry it forward. Who suffered, suffered. Who resisted, left memory. And memory we keep here, in the echoes from the quarters. The rope couldn't kill her spirit, the auction block couldn't break her will, and time won't erase her story. As long as there's breath to speak and ears to listen, Eliza lives. In every act of resistance, in every refusal to break, in every moment when the powerless find power and the strangled strangle back. Her legacy echoes still, calling across the years. Remember, resist, rise. These are the echoes from the quarters, sacred, terrible, and eternal.